First I started off with just regular sexual acts, masturbation. It just got worse and worse.
Elahi would go on to sugar daddy websites and he was blackmailing girls to provide him with graphic sexual images.
Sometimes I'd have to change my manner. I'd have to become more threatening, more violent.
They felt that they had no way out apart from doing these acts that they desperately didn't want to do.
On his phone, at any one given time, he could be abusing 40 or 50 different victims across the world.
When I started selling them, I realised people wanted it to be taken up a notch.
He was offering what he called box sets. He was effectively monetising his perversion.
He admitted to everything the investigators put to him.
I just started seeing on some of the sex accounts on Twitter. So I followed them.
This is a monster who will go to any length to gain imagery for his own sexual gratification or for own financial gain.
He got off on degrading these victims.
And he dedicated every last waking hour to that abuse.
I've never, in my whole experience as being a law enforcement officer, come across so many people that would try and take their own lives.
He was the bully, he was the abuser.
He went on to make these significant admissions during an interview.
So, for examples of videos that would be requested, it would be scat, spit mess, urinating, and then incest.
They are really, really difficult to listen to.
You're talking about degradation, and it really did make me ill.
There were probably 1,000 other victims.
Something would just switch in my head and set me off. And that's it, I need child pornography. It's just taken over me.
That is the largest number of charges any individual has ever faced in the UK courts.
The time by my watch is 8:40 a.m. on Wednesday, 19th of December. This is an interview with Abdul Elahi.
Yes.
You were arrested by myself this morning for offence of possession, offence of distribution of indecent images of children, and inciting a child under the age of 16 to engage in sexual activity. So, tell me what you understand by why you've been arrested.
Getting certain underage people to film sexually explicit content.
We went down to a residential address in Birmingham in order to arrest a person that was living at that house. The door was answered quite quickly by Elahi's father. We explained the reason we were there, that we needed to speak to his son Abdul Elahi. He directed us to a bedroom upstairs. The bedroom that Elahi was in was an absolute tip. And it was clear that he appeared to be spending an awful lot of time in that bedroom. Elahi was arrested in relation to an offence which had occurred in America, actually.
We received a phone call from a US investigator, and he told us a story about a young girl of which she'd been subject to some really quite horrendous online offending. Their original request was to gather evidence on their behalf with the sole intention of getting that individual extradited and prosecuted over in the US. So from that moment in time, it was a relatively simple task which had been sent our way.
Elahi was taken to a local police station by colleagues, but Elahi did not speak at all for a half-hour journey. He just sat in complete silence.
Do you want a solicitor present at this stage?
No, I'm fine for now.
He didn't at that time want legal representation, which was, we felt, a little bit unusual. So a couple of hours later, colleagues interviewed Elahi in relation to the offences for which he'd been arrested, in this case, online grooming and blackmail, of a 15-year-old girl from the United States. Elahi asked her to send him a picture of her topless. One of the things that he would do is he would seek to get some form of identification, and once he had that, he would then become more threatening, and he would demand that the victim, in this case a 15-year-old girl, perform more degrading sexual acts.
I started speaking to her, and she told me her age. I knew she was underage from the start, I believe. I think I asked her for pictures. For some reason, I offered her 50 grand, and I managed to send a fake statement. She believed it somehow, and then I did what I did.
So she would film herself doing these acts and then send those videos and still images to, well, who turned out to be a lie, but at that time, she obviously had no idea who this person was.
What did you ask her to do?
Incest.
Eventually, I think she broke down and told her parents about what had happened, and it was then that local American police got involved, and that's essentially what kicked off the investigation into a lie.
I didn't have to use any threats, and it was fraud. I just lied about money and buying the things that I never did, so I don't believe I put her under any distress.
It's very unusual for somebody to be so candid in an interview. No evidence had really been presented to him at that point, but he spoke straight away.
How many girls would you say you have had actually offered money for and they've engaged in sex acts?
And it was put to him then, had he committed any similar offences in relation to other victims, and the expectation was he might have mentioned another 2 or 3.
Hundreds? If she had Twitter, and I'd say at least 1,000.
Elahi was very open in the fact that he made full and frank admissions throughout. He admitted to everything the investigators put to him.
It was quite shocking, really, because what seemed to be a routine job for us clearly now was going to be something much, much bigger. But even then, I don't think we realised just how massive the job would become, even then.
I wasn't actually actively going out of my way to find young girls. The ones who I did find, I got lucky that they came across me. First I started off with just regular sexual acts, masturbation, stripping, basic things like this. And when I started selling them, I realised people wanted it to be taken up a notch.
Not only did we seize the phones from Elahi on the date of his arrest in December, we then went and recovered I think it was 3 laptop computers and 2 smartphones. All those devices were then taken to our digital forensics team.
If we believe there's going to be further victims out there, we needed to identify them at the earliest opportunity. So we fast-tracked the downloading of data from the mobile telephones, and we then went through the process of reviewing every sort of piece of information which a mobile phone holds.
I think the first major development in terms of the investigation of the devices was we recovered, I think it was 97 WhatsApp chats, where it was clear that Elahi was blackmailing other women and girls to provide him with graphic sexual images.
Robbie got me into the office and then started describing the investigation and how it was going to become quite a big investigation. And would I come on board and look after the victims and go out and approach them at least at first and see if they would do an interview. As soon as we've spoke to them on the phone, we obviously ask if we could meet them face to face, and for them to name the place where we see them, because it may be that people don't want us to go to their home address, and I fully understand that. It might be that they want to keep it private from other people who they live with. To contact the victims, all we may have had is a first name and a phone number. Now, I'm also very conscious that Elahi offended on their phones, but we have to make contact with these victims via phone because that's all we have at this moment in time to contact them. It must be awful for anybody to be contacted by a law enforcement officer and to say, we have found your phone number on somebody's phone that we're worried about, and do you know anything about it? That would be the first question I would ask, and usually they would say, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about, and the majority of people would say, yeah, I want to speak about it.
Like I said, I was in a group for pornography. So this guy sent me some links, and then I thought, because the one he sent me was, it had UK girls, and they were around 13 to 16, and I thought I could try and sell these. If someone had asked me, do you have a schoolgirl of what you've done, I'd say yes, but I didn't go out of my way to selling her. That's why I don't think she's out there as much as the American girl.
I think at that stage, we'd pretty much established that this individual could be quite a serious perpetrator. It's like lifting a stone, you're not quite sure what's underneath it.
When did you start this behaviour, shall we say?
There were videos of the pics of the underage ones.
Everything.
It's the start of the year it happened, to be honest. I was working and studying at the time, and I found this app, the Sugar Daddy app. And what I was doing, getting them to pay for, lying to them about videos and pics, it just happened accidentally, and then I got addicted to it.
Elahi would go on to Sugar Daddy websites and would look to engage with girls and young women.
What's the chat? How does it go?
Hey, are you a Sugar Daddy account? Me, yes I am. I need help.
Once it sort of got somebody on the hook, it very quickly asked them to go on to WhatsApp, saying that basically WhatsApp was a better medium to exchange images and videos.
On WhatsApp, I'd ask an initial question, tell me your age, occupation and current financial situation. Depending on how broke they were, I'd know how further they were willing to go.
Elahi was trying to portray this image of a jet-setting businessman who had money that he was willing to give to these women on these sites if they provided him with some fairly innocuous images.
You start off, you say you send a message offering
money for videos. I'd offer £50 to £200 or dollars.
And have you paid any of those girls?
I didn't pay any of those, no.
Did you intend to pay them all?
No.
And he'd start off by saying, can you send pictures of your high heel shoes? And then he'd talk about how much money that he had, and he created a Circle Pay account in which it appeared he had thousands and thousands of pounds, but that was to try and prove to these girls on these websites that he was a bona fide person who just wanted to share a bit of his wealth with them if they provided with some mildly sexualised images.
And he would then take them through some very basic requests. Show me your favourite underwear.
And then he might ask for a topless photograph.
Follow this pose, and he would get them to pose in a certain way, and if they were a bit unsure, he would send them an image of a previous victim doing the same pose, and he would say, copy this. And eventually, slowly but surely, the images will become ever more sexualised.
After we'd interviewed Elahi, and even though he'd made this revelation that he'd committed potentially numerous offences, we can only hold someone in police custody for usually a maximum of 24 hours anyway.
We'll have to speak to the Sergeant now and see about getting you released. We're going to have to discuss some conditions about what you can and cannot do whilst you're away from here.
When you put an individual on police bail, you can put a number of conditions on them. The fact that they can't have any unsupervised access to a child under the age of 18.
Signing on at the police station a couple of times a week so he couldn't abscond, making sure that he lived at a particular address.
Limitations to how many digital devices they have.
And also ensuring that if a police officer or an NC officer turned up at his house at any reasonable hour, he would have to show them his internet-enabled devices.
So we stuck Elahi on really strict bail conditions on day one.
But it's not a perfect world, because if Elahi went out and bought a phone and didn't declare it to us and hid it, and then used it not at his home address, there's no way that we would have known about that. There were also on Elahi's devices 4,000 phone contacts, 2,000 WhatsApp contacts, millions of images, potentially decent images of children which had to be catalogued.
Myself and the rest of the team realised that this could potentially be a really high-risk offender with multiple victims pretty much spread across the globe.
And that meant going finding victims and taking statements off them.
It became apparent that the offending was on such a large scale that we had to work pretty fast to go and see these victims to safeguard them. So this particular victim, she had been asked to be naked, strip off, and then do all sorts of acts that were very degrading and send these images. And the reason that, she continued to send the images is because she was being blackmailed. It's very difficult sometimes to gauge how to speak to people because, they've been through an absolutely harrowing event and we need to know exactly what's happened for us to put that to the offenders for some justice.
We knew, putting that individual out in society, that the ability for law enforcement to effectively manage a risk which an online offender poses is really, really challenging.
We went to the CPS in February 2019, and by that stage we had identified, interviewed and got statements from 7 victims who Elahi had blackmailed online, and that would mean we could rearrest him, charge him and hopefully get him remanded into custody.
His devices need to be interrogated, and that takes time, unfortunately, and so as a result of that he was on bail whilst we interrogated his devices.
We had an individual who was out there. He had committed horrendous criminal acts. We felt on a self-imposed timescale that we needed to get him arrested and charged at the earliest, and with that we had to put all our efforts and all the NCA's capability to bring the offender to justice at the earliest opportunity.
Not unreasonably, the Crown Prosecution Service asked were there still inquiries to do in relation to the investigation, and there were. So the CPS took the view that until we had completed those inquiries, they could not reasonably consider the case and authorise charges. From our initial scoping of the devices we seized from Elahi, there were probably potentially 1,000 other victims. So there was clearly a lot of work to do, and the CPS highlighted that and said, well, you need to go and find these other victims.
Were we frustrated? I think if I speak on behalf of my colleagues, the answer to that would be yes. As rigorously as we could impose the bail conditions, just give us the greatest sense of security that we're actually stopping somebody from offending. So the risk was real and evident that this serious, dangerous individual was still out there on the streets.
It's like I'm trying to explain. I'll have a normal day. I'll come home from work. I'll be exhausted. I'll be fine. And then something will just switch in my head and set me off. And then that's it. I need the child pornography because it's just taken over me.
Is it fair to say then that you do masturbate over the child pornography images when you get this urge?
I still did it, yes, but that wasn't the main thing. My other priority was, the women.
Okay. And you'd look at those videos?
Yes.
Is that, do you watch that for your own, while you masturbate?
I generally, I know people just say it, but I generally do. I have something wrong with me mentally. And I need to figure out what it is. It's just I've always been afraid to speak to a therapist because she'll probably fall off the chair if she knew what I've done.
Twitter account set up, or your sugar daddy, you got your false name, what happens then?
You don't even have to manipulate or blackmail or whatever. You just thought I was lying and saying I'd give them money.
A lot of victims in this case were university students. They go into university and they find it very difficult financially. They'd heard about these sites that they could gain some money, so they experiment and go on these sites. However, it just so happened that these individuals went on the sites that Elahi were on.
What was the purpose of sending new victims videos of old victims? Efficiency, because a lot of the times I realised the girls had never done or never followed these kinds of instructional videos before. So to speed things up, instead of me giving a detailed description where they could have messed it up, it was much easier to just send them a video to copy it so they can replicate it. And I found that sped things up.
He almost had script which he would cut and paste from one communications to the other. And I think we found on occasions he was communicating with 2 or 3 different girls at the same time. He was so prolific in his offending. So it was really evident the script was there, his MO was really well laid out. And he followed it meticulously on pretty much every occasion.
Have you asked for any other personal details of the girls you've spoken to? Date of birth, letters showing proof of address, photographs of their bank card and their passport?
Yes.
He then asked the victim to provide some kind of identification document. He used a number of excuses for that. One, he said that he had OCD and he just needed to know who the person was. And ironically, other times he'd say that he needed an identification document to prove that the person was over the age of 18. And then certainly I remember one particular chat where the girl had told, actually, I'm only 16. And he said, oh, it doesn't matter, just send the documents anyway. Once he got the identification and the social media profiles, he then had the weapon that he could use to say, I now want you to do X, Y, and Z for me. And faced with that predicament, many of the victims were by now desperate, but felt they had no other option to carry out his wishes.
They felt that they had no way out apart from doing these acts that they desperately didn't want to do.
So instead of just letting them go away easily, I had to figure a way to make them think I'm some kind of evil monster.
And if you don't do that, I'm going to publish your photographs to your family and friends. And sometimes he'd also threatened he was going to publish them on porn websites. He had a massive sadistic streak. He got off on having power over people. He got off on degrading these victims.
experience as being a law enforcement officer, I've come across so many people who is affected so badly that they either A, would self-harm, or B, try and take their own lives.
To point out the serious nature of this, some of these girls have considered committing suicide.
Have any of them?
No.
Yeah. That's another thing that surprised me. None of them did.
I think the sharing of it is what is actually pushed the girls over the edge. Once that material is out there, and friends and family do see it.
I know.
You could see that they're in an absolute desperate state to have done those things. If we picked up on anything about self-harm or taking their own lives, then we would be making out to their addresses ASAP.
We managed by this point to obtain witness statements from 30 victims and went back to the Crown Prosecution Service to see if they would now authorise charges. The CPS maintained their view that were there still potential other victims out there, and clearly there were, because we were still tracing them on a regular basis.
The CPS ultimately are the decision makers on when they can bring charges against an individual, and we have to work alongside them as partners and do our utmost to fulfil our side of the process.
And they maintain their stance that until the full extent of Ilahi's criminality had been investigated, then they weren't in a position to authorise charges.
I think myself and the college will say we were equally as frustrated as we were the first time round.
Ilahi was still out on bail at that point. He was still under strict conditions, but we could not guarantee that he was not continuing to offend. We had the additional pressure as an investigation team of we had to look after our victims. They quite rightly were saying, well, I've given you a witness statement. Why aren't you taking any action against this man? Why has he not been charged?
Tell me about what you asked her to do.
She did pretty much every single messed up thing I've asked all the girls to do, apart from cutting. So stripping, masturbating, anal, feces, urinating, toilet tasks, feet stuff, gagging, spit mess, and then incest.
He would ask his victims if they had any children, and we did subsequently recover some incest videos from Ilahi's cache, if you like.
Can't remember exactly if she messaged me first or if I messaged her.
So initially it was on Instagram.
Yes, and then it moved on to WhatsApp.
So when you said you asked her her age, what she told you?
I think she was 15 at the time.
And in terms of brother, how did that conversation arrive?
I think I asked if she wanted to earn some extra money, and then I just asked if she had any siblings, and she told me she had a brother.
In this particular case, I had to look at certain images in relation to the crimes against a child.
So then I said, if you do certain things with him, I'll pay you extra.
What did you ask her to do?
I think there might have been nudity involved between the two of them, but there's no penetration. It was the blowjob, but if I can remember. With him, I think she did about 2 to 3 videos, but I can't remember exactly.
So she was 13?
She was 13?
Yeah.
She told me she was 15.
Yeah.
It's still bad, but...
I think it's one of the most unpleasant jobs that a law enforcement officer will ever do. You know, it takes its toll. It really does.
We identified a number of cases where Ilahi had blackmailed victims to sexually abuse either their siblings or their children, and we came across a number of cases like these, and they form the most serious type of offending.
And what about the one where you've got a mother or an adult female having sexual activity with children? Do you watch that for your own, while you masturbate?
Very occasionally, it's just there to stop me from going back to Telegram to look for other stuff.
I mean, I've gone through some of your images, and there's some pretty horrific, very young, toddlers in there.
Again, that just ends up with it gets traded through, the links.
A 9-month-old baby is somebody who is the most vulnerable you will ever come across, and to be abused by a member of your family is quite sickening.
When I asked the Australian girl, and even before the other one with the baby, honestly, I don't know why I did that.
You're not sexually aroused?
No.
You might have a day where you've got to sit in front of a computer and look at indecent images because you have to grade them in seriousness of offences. So if you've got 8 hours in front of a computer doing that, it might be the end of the day that I ask if that officer, are you alright? Because they're just going home and just acting like they've had a normal day at work when you haven't. You've been looking at indecent images of children that is just vile.
One of the phones that was seized by Western Police was a Samsung Galaxy S9, and that's where a 33-second video where the young girl is asking her younger brother to touch her breast. Can you recall asking him to do that?
Yes.
And a 20-second cover video where the young girl is masturbating, and the brother sat next to her watching it. Did you ask her to do that?
Yes, I think so.
I think whilst the investigation's running, you live and breathe it every day, and it doesn't leave your head. However, it's not a job that you can go home and talk to your loved ones about, because, you're talking about indecent images, you're talking about degradation.
The investigation team, quite rightly, were concerned that there was such a degree of risk which still existed because Ilahi was not remanded in custody.
We went back to the CPS for a third time, and at that point I think we had 74 victims. And it was at that point, really, that the CPS decided to employ a Queen's Counsel, now King's Counsel.
That is a huge relief, because we could never confidently say that this individual was not carrying on reaching out to victims.
She does, at one point in the chat, say, well, she appears to become distressed and says she wants to stop and be done. And you said, once I've had my fun, unless you want to be posted.
Yes, that was a general.
Yeah. What did you do with those images?
I put them in a set, and
You say a set, so talk me through what you do to produce those.
I send the instructional videos. I ask them to film videos, stripping, masturbation, the usual content. Then after the videos, it goes on to pictures, where I'll ask for half of them to be naked, half to be lingerie, and then a bunch of their clothed or selfie pictures, if they're done up or if they're not done up, and that creates a set. So, for examples of videos that would be requested, where they were offering higher amounts, it would be scat, spit mess, urinating, public sometimes, but just outside. and then certain people that me for incest. And then that's where that came in with the younger. And then other people would be like, okay, I want younger teenagers, and I'll give you so and so much money.
As the SIO, I was managing the expectations of my senior leaders. This was the highest priority investigation within the whole of the National Crime Agency. So we were then faced with an incredibly dangerous sexual predator, albeit online. So the management of risk escalated even further. I can't even underplay how important that was to us.
When we had the first meeting with the NCA and the CPS, there had already been provided to me a large amount of material. So it was a case of a voyage of discovery to a certain extent, as all first conferences tend to be, and especially with a case such as this, where there's a massive international element to it. My feelings at that stage, where we needed to be focused on how we were going to present this.
Mr. Langdale was just fantastic to have him on board. He grasped the facts of the investigation straight away and provided us with some fantastic advice which really focused our attention. We started looking at some of the imagery in Eli's devices. Eli appeared to be having conversations with like-minded individuals where he was offering what he called box sets for sale.
At some stage he identified there was a financial opportunity which existed, and then it became a little bit more financially driven.
One of the strangest aspects of all of this is that this was effectively, although an adult, a male living at home, and he had decided that his career would take in the abuse of women and children, and he dedicated every last waking hour to that abuse. He was a clever, manipulative individual, which made him more dangerous. He had the commercial nous in relation to his abuse to be able to put forward what he would describe as box sets.
The username real. What does that mean to you?
It was just a name I gave to myself, because when I made Tumblr, I was following UK pages, and it was UK sluts or chavs, something like that.
Okay. And that was a username, real.
Yeah. I did that for a few months, and I sold the set to someone. I sold a big album to someone for a lower amount of money, because I needed it desperately. I mean, God knows what this guy did. I must have gave him 50 albums of British girls. They end up on porn websites all over the internet, and then I started going more underground.
And when we looked into that a little bit more deeply, he'd created a website called Real, and how he achieved that when he was speaking to his victims, as well as obtaining the sexually explicit videos and photographs, he would obtain pictures from their social media of them just doing normal things, and then he'd mix in the normal social media photographs with the sexually explicit photographs, and he'd sell them as box sets online. So he was effectively monetizing his perversion.
His USP as such was that he was selling the girl next door imagery rather than individuals involved in the adult sex industry. A box set would start off with the usual selfies as to, what young girls do and teenagers do, etc. And then it would go very slowly feed in as to how he would carry out his criminality. Images of the shoes, images of them sticking the tongue out, and then it would go into the more sexually explicit, depraved act.
He'd offer his box sets at a discounted price or a more expensive price. And the discounted price, you get the photographs and the images, but the more expensive version, you could get not only the images, you would also get the identification documents of that victim. So that enabled other sick individuals to re-victimise.
It's from my personal experience, I had no idea that the girls, the sets I was selling, as naive as it sounds, I didn't realise they were being flooded on the internet that much. I was on Pornhub myself one day, and I saw a girl from one of my sets, and I realised, oh, okay, this is what's happening. So I kind of had to go into these darker groups to sell, but to sell privately.
So Mr. Langdale looked at the evidence, and one of the things we asked him to focus on was the offence of blackmail complete when Elahi was victimising these girls and young women?
I always label my sets as blackmail, because most of the people buying off me, that's what they think it is. They think it's blackmail.
Blackmail is it? You sent me some
Yeah.
videos and pictures, or how?
That's why I'd always label it as I'm a blackmailer.
Blackmail basically is where you ask somebody for something that you've got no right to ask for, and you threaten them in order to achieve obtaining that.
It was either she stopped messaging me, or she lost interest in the videos, and because I wanted her to complete a set, I had to resort to sending threats.
What was the nature of those threats?
Blackmail, threatening, Pornhub, I believe. But again, it wasn't my intent to cause her distress. My pure intent was just to get her to finish it all off.
He would sell material of an abusive nature in 1 terabyte boxes at a time. So you're talking about 100,000 dictionaries worth of material, all packaged up and sold in videos and photographs to other paedophiles around the world who would pay him money.
So what's the purpose of creating these sets?
So they're organised properly, so that when it comes to me selling them, uploading them onto Mega or Dropbox, they're done properly. I actually did consider it a job, because I took it. I was organised, because I was making money from it.
Yeah, from the job point of view, how were you paid by people?
Stupidly enough, when I started, actually, I was being paid on Circle Pay. Right. And that's when I started to realise I can black these payments.
So you had a Circle Pay?
I had Circle Pay, I had PayPal. I think I've got a PayPal frozen with £500 in it. My access. But Amazon gift cards.
Amazon gift cards was it common?
They're the main ones, yeah.
He had an extensive money laundering operation behind it to try to avoid himself getting caught, and also to benefit from the actual money that he was making. So much so that he would be paid again in fairly novel ways. So Amazon gift cards would be provided by those that he would sell the material to. He would then sell those on reselling sites under false names in order to get cash into false bank accounts, which would then eventually come, he thought, untraceable to him. On his estimations, he was making something in the region of £40,000 a year by abusing children and women across the world.
I realised people wanted it to be taken up a notch, and then that's when I started taking requests for different things. I'll give you an example. It's disgusting, but scat, which is poo they will call it. I had a guy who claimed to be rich in India. He used to give me a lot on Amazon gift cards for that.
We're satisfied we were on the right tracks, and that at some stage we were going to get Mr. Elahi in court.
As soon as we've talked to them on the phone, we obviously ask if we could meet them face to face. So it's all about what does the victim want and where do they want to meet. These are people now who can't even take part in video calls. They found it very uncomfortable to walk down the street because they didn't know who they were passing. Could that be him? Could that be him? They had no idea who they were speaking to. It was Very scary for those girls.
There is a lot of work going on in the background by agencies across the world as to how they can protect the protectors, is what the terminology is used. There is a whole host of impacts, and every individual will respond differently as to how they can, what coping mechanisms they can put in place when dealing with this type of investigation.
Over time, it has affected me in relation to dealing with child abuse investigations.
Jane, she was brilliant with victims, but it did badly affect her. I think it was a cumulative effect, really.
Yeah, it has a massive effect on you. There's certain things that once you've seen, you can't unsee.
We received notification from the Met Police that they were investigating a horrendous act against a vulnerable adult victim.
I've never actually done anything to a woman apart from the stupid thing I did in London, because again my head went.
What was that?
I asked her, have you ever done any naked modelling before? She said no. I said, would you be comfortable to? She said yes. I said okay, so I took a few pictures of her.
Fortunately, this incredibly vulnerable adult female was taken in by Elahi's advances, was taken down a side alley and was sexually abused. So it went from online into physical contact.
Then what happened?
And then she said I raped her, but I never raped her.
So you say you didn't rape her, what did you do?
I took the pictures, but because she had learning difficulties, she felt like I'd raped her, or penetrated her, or anything like that.
The victim reported that to the Metropolitan Police, and CCTV was recovered, and then a young Met detective did some fantastic work and identified him and arrested him. And when they searched his bag, they recovered a smartphone from the bag.
But what that did do is trigger through my senior leaders in engagement with senior Crown prosecutors that this individual was escalating his offending level.
Fortunately, this young Met detective was really switched on, and I recall getting a phone call from him to say that Eli had been arrested in relation to a sexual assault and that he'd recovered a phone from him. And I said, I'm coming down now, and that showed that Elahi was still committing offences as per his usual script.
And it was agreed at that stage, so in August 2020, that we had sufficient evidence to charge Elahi with a number of offences.
Now we had the smoking gun, if you like, where we could go and arrest him and charge him.
This interview has been audio recorded in a legal visits room at HMP Birmingham. The date is Tuesday the 8th of December 2020 and the time now is 14:32 hours. My name's Andy Peach, National Crown Agency. For the audio, Abdul, could you give your full name and date of birth, please?
Abdul Bilahi, 14th of March 1995.
On the face of it, he was somebody who you would pass in the street without thinking anything of. He was the type of person who would be bullied in society, but when it came to abusing these women and children, he gained a different persona. Suddenly, for once, outside of the real world as he would see it, he was the bully, he was the abuser. And when you looked at the reality, he was just some geeky kid in Birmingham who'd barely worked at all in his life, but who was clearly someone who was extremely capable when it came to putting his mind to abuse and sadism. Bearing in mind that he was doing it across continents, his abuse would start with those in the UK. It would then move across the world to those who were in New York or in America or in Australia, and his day would just circulate around, continuing the abuse. So by the time he was arrested, on his phone at any one given time, he could be abusing 40 or 50 different victims across the world. As a rule of thumb, you have to get from point of them going into custody, so when their bail is refused at the police station, to getting them in front of a jury within a 6-month period. As a result of that, the starting gun is fired on your 6 months.
We knew that the CPS were now becoming convinced that this was going to go to court, that charges were going to be issued against Elahi at some stage.
We were confident we were going to get to a position relatively quickly that we could bring charges against Elahi and then start to put him through the criminal justice process.
I can't remember for what reason she stopped doing it, or she seemed like she didn't want to, and then I had to make my threats. All the threats I made were not to distress her, they were purely for my own commercial gains. But for her, I do recall it. I asked her to hold up some pieces of paper with words I had to write, and then some of the more grotesque tasks I asked her to do, so for this one I'll accept it as blackmail.
Just because somebody's charged doesn't mean that's the end of the job. In fact, quite the opposite. That's when we get really busy, because we have to produce the evidence to support a case that is hopefully going to lead to a conviction. And we couldn't just assume, despite Elahi's admissions at every interview, we couldn't just assume that he was going to plead guilty, so we had to plan for a trial.
I think the most compelling evidence was probably those where he had directed their activity. And as with many of these cases, there's never one single piece, but it's when you put a couple of pieces together and they fit perfectly to give a narrative or a story. And the perfect fitting of pieces were, on one stage, for many of these victims, you had partial WhatsApp logs. So you had a blackmail occurring, but what he had learned to do, when he got to the serious blackmail, the serious extortion, so the threats, he would immediately delete them. So what you had for many victims was partial logs. So you had very pleasant talk and chats going on beforehand, then you had blank, and then the end result, which was a victim in tears and threatening to kill themselves and do anything that he was demanding.
There's a lot of thought that goes in from first identifying a chat log with a telephone number attached to us actually going out and deploying staff to go and meet that individual and to see whether they would be prepared to support an investigation.
It's very difficult for two strangers to speak about something like this. What I'd say to the individuals is, the more I know about it, the more we know about the offender, and hopefully lay charges on the offender, because we need to get the full picture of exactly what they've made you do, the victim, and how they've made you feel.
Elahi would retain the chat logs, but he would delete the images or upload them into a cloud account. So it wasn't a complete type of imagery, and then you could see that the victim would send the image, but that image would not be there.
The operation would involve you going and checking every single one of those files to try to find the one which may have the log of that particular individual. And no computer software in the world was there to assist. It was a human dimension which the NCA team had to do for each victim.
In terms of the child sexual abuse images, which are category A and category B. Category A is the most serious, which involves penetrative sexual activity. Category B is involves sexual activity but non-penetrative, so for example masturbation.
I don't think there's any Cat A on there, is there? Or is it on Mega, or is it on My Pictures?
Whether they've come from Mega or Telegram or another source, I don't know, but they're on your phone.
Okay.
The real breakthrough came that some of the logs hadn't been deleted. He put it together, the jigsaw started to make sense. You could see within the transcripts of these messages going backwards and forth, him directing the abuse of children, him directing the abuse, both sadistic and violent abuse of grown women, and you could see that then occurring on the screen in a number of the videos which were recovered. And he would follow his own script, where he had practiced over time to get the most psychological pressures that he could apply to his victims. He could push particular buttons to make sure they come to his will, to his want.
We started to put together a prosecution file. We obviously had the raw material of the witness evidence from the victims. We had the digital evidence from Eli's devices. We had the WhatsApp chats. We had imagery. We had videos. We had digital forensic reports.
Blackmail was the core offence running through. So where he had blackmailed individuals, he'd extorted them, he faced a blackmail charge. He was also then charged with a mass of child sexual abuse, so that covered where he was making images of children, where he was distributing them, so for example when he was selling material on the internet or when he was passing it between other paedophiles, and then you had the various acts of sexual abuse on the children.
I'm just worried about my sentence. That's the main thing that's bugging me out. A lot of this comes on the blackmail, revenge porn. Revenge porn laws are fairly new, aren't they?
Yeah, they are, yeah.
Plus a lot of what I'm doing is fairly new too.
But the actual crimes are not new.
Well, I'm saying the new
fraud have been around for years, but
the online side to
yeah.
and what I've done. Have you guys ever had a case like this?
No, we haven't.
The custody officer happily volunteered to read out all the charges, and I think it took him an hour and 7 minutes to read them all out.
Count 1. Causing or inciting a child under 13 to engage in sexual activity. Count 2. Causing or inciting a child under 13 making indecent photographs of a child. Count 5. Causing or inciting a child under 13. Count 52 to engage in sexual blackmail. Count 57. Disclosed private sexual photographs with him. Count 97. Blackmail. Count 99. Fraud. Count 138. Possession of extreme pornographic images.
There's 150 separate charges which Elahi was finally charged with. Adrian will say, anecdotally, that is probably the largest number of individual charges any individual has ever faced in the UK courts.
When it does happen, the court case, will I be putting because do certain prisons have sex offenders?
Yes, yeah.
I'll be thrown in with those guys, won't I?
Sections of prison differ, you're not going to be walking around with the signs saying what you've done.
But they still categorise the online guys, or no?
Yeah.
I thought I'd be thrown in with the people who are raping kids, molesting. Going to sleep at night, I'm thinking, okay, so when my court case comes, I've got all my victims from the UK, I've got the FBI wanting to extradite me, I've got Australia, probably other governments I don't even know about, so I don't think about my future, I don't think about that, because I know that's gone down the toilet. All I think about is, how can I stay strong mentally every day, don't feel suicidal.
The types of offenders that we're dealing with in these types of cases, they are by nature hugely manipulative. They are individuals who do not want to be caught and will try absolutely anything to escape. But if you can demonstrate there are no escape routes for them, then they will reassess their position, and it's a straightforward position of working out what risk is over benefit for them.
He appeared in the Crown Court, and there are a number of administrative hearings that have to happen. Elahi was left with no option but to plead guilty to everything. Every victim was kept fully abreast of what was happening in the investigation throughout.
Elahi knew from his last interview the game was up. He had been crushed by the weight of the evidence.
Is there anything else we need to discuss now?
I feel like I've been as honest as I could about everything you've seen on my phone in regards to what there is. I try to control myself, and like I said 2-3 weeks ago, I could have been. You could have. When you came knocking today, you could have easily caught me red-handed again, and I could have filled a new phone. Because, you know, I could have, but I don't want to do it. My life's just been turned upside down.
The fact that eventually we were going to bring some closure to the victims who had very patiently stayed with us throughout this process was satisfying.
In recent years, victims now can make a victim personal statement or a victim impact statement, and it's so impactful to hear. So, for example, one of the victims had to drop out of university. I didn't know that. I didn't know what an impact it had on her.
Some people took that opportunity up, some people didn't, and 4 of our victims decided that they wanted to be in court and to actually read their victim statements out to Ilahi. And for them to tell Ilahi how he has affected them.
They came together as a group, they shared their emotions together, there were emotions within the investigation team. What I got from it was a genuine sense of relief, and almost a genuine sense that they were pleased with what we've achieved for them, and that again is something which I'm very proud of. Yeah.
Mr. Ilahi was found dangerous by the judge. She'd concluded that he remains and was a risk to the public. As a result of that, she passed what is described as an extended sentence. So the prison part of it will be 32 years, and he will serve at least 2/3 of that prison sentence before the parole board will consider whether or not he is safe to be released.
For an online offender, that's an incredibly high sentence. We were probably thinking about 24 to 26 years. So to get 32 years, we were absolutely delighted with.
I think Ilahi generally came across as a fairly quiet, calculating individual. He is an individual who lived up until that point largely in the shadows. He had strength from being an internet persona as opposed to the real world. And I think when you took him away from that protection, he came across as just a scared and worried little man.
At the point when he was sentenced, Ilahi was motionless. He didn't look at the victims when they were reading out the victim impact statements. He, as an individual, just dismissed it all. Soulless individual with zero empathy.
The judge told him to stand up. She gives a 32-year sentence. At that point, he was thinking, well, what happens now? And one of the security officers had to tap him on the shoulder and say, come on, you're off down to the cell, son.
In my day-to-day life, I was a normal person. I was just a normal guy. I wasn't violent. I don't know if it was my own personal issues, but I need to figure out what was wrong with me exactly. That made me switch off that conscience I had.
The rise and proliferation of online crime is so vast. It is swamping UK law enforcement. Is it for me to say we are struggling to deal with it? I think it's probably a fair answer.
It is the Wild West out on the internet, and no one is policing it properly, and no laws are seemingly dealing with it.
My personal feeling of the internet is it creates an opportunity which never existed before. And that opportunity is for individuals who are socially inept to go and ruin people's lives. Those who worked on it, we lived this investigation. It took over our lives. We invested so much time, so much anxiety due to frustrations of trying to get this individual off the street at the earliest opportunity.
I won't say you get used to it, because I don't think you ever get used to it, but you become hardened to what you end up seeing. That's not to say it doesn't continue to haunt you, and cases like this will haunt you till your dying days.
Will I be the same as I ever was? No, never. I was living it every day. I couldn't get away from it. And it really did make me ill.
The job affected me, and you did feel for a lot of the victims, but you've got to keep a little bit of you for yourself. It does take its toll.